Welcome to the YouTube of Robert McCullough Exposed. This is kind of a fun picture of a tabloid kind of reveal. I'm sure Robert is pretty pleased with it because we're actually talking about him. I'm sure he feels like that English writer who said there's only one thing worse than when people are talking about you, and that's when they're not talking about you. And we're going to talk about Robert McCullough. He's running for office again. He wants to be on the board of the Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association. This is a very, very bad idea. He has been very bad for the neighborhood, and I'll show you why. We're going to look at some of the things he said, and we're going to look at the things he hasn't done, and we're going to look at his part in one of the most divisive and damaging events ever to occur in Eastmoreland. We're still healing over it. Good families had to move away. You'll be really surprised if you're not familiar with it, what went on just a few years ago. There was such unkindness and such cruelty, actually. And Robert was very much a part of it. But we're going to look at some of the things that he's saying, and we're going to unpack the truth behind it, or at least the facts I've been able to find. Perhaps you'll come to the same conclusion I've come to, that he's not a person to be trusted, and to have him on the board of the Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association again would be very bad. So when you vote, make sure you do not vote for him. Vote for anyone else. There are good people running, and the board needs to be moved along its course of transformation and leave him and his legacy behind. So let's get Robert off of here and get him to shrink down a bit. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, let's put him over here. And here I am walking along in Eastmoreland, and my name is Bert Sperling, and I'm the administrator here at Eastmoreland Neighborhood, LLC, a little organization we have to try to improve things around the neighborhood and call things as we see them. So anyway, here I am taking a look around the neighborhood and enjoying the beautiful sunset. I love the sunset when the sun comes through the trees. Okay, let me run down some of the things we'll talk about, some of the things you have to look forward to. I think let's talk about the trees on Reed College Place. Robert's very proud of all the work that he's done in keeping the trees safe and all the effort they put into saving them from the city, which has, quote, abandoned them. Well, the city abandoned them, so Robert can abandon them. But we'll talk about that and what the facts are about that. We'll look at his leadership for the historic district. We'll look at his statements about a poll that was done for the historic district and how that was misleading and deceptive. We'll look at the email mailing list of the ENA when he was removed by the people of ENA. They voted him off the board. I've never known that to happen before, but he was voted off the board, and I don't know, maybe out of spite or whatever, he took the mailing list that they had entrusted to him and said, no, it's mine. You can't have it back. And I'll show you what the ENA said to him regarding that. And we'll also talk about the use of Reed College Place and pesticide, which he had denied using, but it came out that he had, and still won't talk about how much of it had been used in the past and what we were all exposed to for how many number of years. And there's also a pretty amusing look at drone surveillance, a news clip about his, he was going to surveil the drone, surveil the neighborhood via drone, keeping it safe for everyone, and surveil the rail yards. That didn't last long. And then I'm going to talk to you about his birth as a neighborhood activist. Robert's very pleased with the notion of how he has been doing this for so long and how this came to be. I had a front row seat to see the metamorphosis of him into a neighborhood leader, and it's pretty amusing. And so we'll finish up with that. So anyway, once again, this is Bert Sperling with Eastmoreland Neighborhood, LLC. What you see is the result of our work investigation regarding this, and it's all about Robert McCullough exposed. And we get to hear not just in his words, but we dig behind what he said and what actually happened. Okay, let's talk about care of the trees on Reed College Place. Robert is fond of saying how the city had abandoned the trees and also somehow conflating the condition of the grass and a muddy strip with the care of the trees. The reality is that almost all of the money that the E&A spends, and I suppose much of it has been at Robert's direction as chairman of the Reed College Place maintenance, all of it has been spent on growing the grass and making it pretty. Despite all the talk about the trees and the care of the trees and the love of the trees, etc., the fact is that they have been pretty much neglected. This is the extent of the pruning that's done. The city comes through with their trucks to make it better for vehicles like moving vans and Amazon delivery vehicles, and they cut away at the branches that have been knocked off by the vehicles. And they'll also go up high and they'll flail away with some saw-like device that will hack away at low-hanging limbs and overhanging limbs to make it safer for traffic and for cars beneath. Their job is not to prune for any sort of care of the trees. And I'll show you in a minute exactly what I mean. What the city does is they just do the bare minimum. The bare minimum to make them safe for traffic and to keep them from getting knocked around. It's sort of like getting a haircut when the tree needs surgery. And it needs surgery to stay healthy. And that has not been done. That has not been done at all by the neighborhood association. There has been no money spent since, I believe, 2010 on actual pruning of the trees to promote their health and vitality. Let me show you what I mean. There was a report that was commissioned by the E&A back in, let's see, do we have a date on this? I believe it was like 2021, something like that. A really great report. And it was about the Reed College Place and the inventory of all the trees and their condition and what needed to be done. Here it is, March 2021, right down here. This was all prepared. This has been in the hands of the E&A for 5 years. And to my knowledge, there has been no action on it whatsoever, despite calls that trees must be dealt with for a matter of safety. There have been trees falling in the neighborhood that have been unsafe and dangerous. And fortunately, no one's been injured, but they have been ignored from a standpoint of safety and health to the trees. So let's dig into this report. 257 linden trees were inventoried. That's the number of trees on the Reed College Place strip. Only 2 of those trees, only 2, were in excellent condition. 54 trees were in good condition. So out of 257, only 56 were in good or excellent. 167 trees were in fair condition. 32 were in poor and 2 were in very poor condition. Can you imagine losing 34 trees? How that would impact the beauty of the Reed College Place. So this report was available to the ENA, and basically the arborist said that there are high priority safety concerns that should be addressed first. 2 trees should be removed immediately. There's no way to save them. There's a priority 1 prune. 3 trees needed large deadwood removed, and 59 trees should have a priority to remove large deadwood and provide clearance. That is a large number of trees. Here's what I found on Reed College Place after the report came out. One of the trees came down during the winter a few years ago. This went across the roadway. If it had gone the other way, it would have taken out the house. It might have killed someone. It might have taken out a vehicle, several vehicles. Yet the ENA has done nothing about that. And the ENA, I think the person responsible is Robert McCullough, but he doesn't say that they haven't done any work. They've said they've done all this pruning all the time. Well, it's the city that does, and basically it's giving the trees a haircut. Purely cosmetic and simply to improve commerce as opposed to the health of the trees. The report goes on to say that routine pruning should be done on 179 trees. Small trees, only 7 trees require routine pruning. And there are 6 trees that are healthy enough that they need no priority pruning whatsoever. So out of the entire Reed College Place, all of these trees practically need pruning. Yet no pruning has been done on that to reduce the deadwood, to provide better health and wellness for the tree. It's just been ignored. There's been no money spent on it. The ENA seems to be very pleased at saving money. They have over $100,000. At least the last time I looked, they had over $100,000 in their account. And some on the ENA are concerned. They say, what's the point? What is the point in having a neighborhood association if all we do is save the money that people donate to us and we don't spend it? I'm encouraged by that. But Robert is part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. He's obfuscating the entire work that he's doing on it, which is basically tending the grass and making sure the grass is pretty and green. And that's the reason. In fact, at the end, I'm going to tell you about his origin story as a neighborhood activist, and that grass has a lot to do with it. You'll see. So, Reed College Place. I wish they would spend the money. You got the money, spend it on the trees. That's what people are giving you the money for. Instead, what we get are outright mistruths about what they're actually doing on it, which is absolutely nothing. Let's talk about the Eastmoreland Historic District. The Eastmoreland Historic District was set into place way back around 2013, 14, 15, when there were houses being demolished, and people in Eastmoreland, at least the ENA, certainly wanted the neighborhood protected against teardowns and rebuilds and increasing density. Let's take a look at what they said. The ENA felt threatened that houses were going to be demolished and it would destroy the integrity of the neighborhood. There's also other elements at play. Here's a piece from OPB, and they did this story back in 2016, just as the historic district was sort of getting going. And there's a quote from someone that was on the board at the time, named Tim Moore. Our feeling is that the density should be where it belongs. You're talking about lower income people or younger people who want to rent or need to rent, and they need to be where there's good transit. This is a little oasis because it's down here and it's just not appropriate. Ooh, ouch. That is kind of cringe. But it unfortunately shines a light on what was going on. They don't want to destroy the neighborhood with more density and lower income people. I like it the way it is. So what they thought they could do is put in place the National Historic District. And the problem is a lot of people in Eastmoreland were against it, or at least they had different ideas. And the board decided the best way to deal with this dissatisfaction was to attack the people, to divide them, to ridicule them, to set against them. And the most unbelievable things happened right here in our neighborhood. And Robert was the president from 2013 to 2016, when I think he kind of time limited out and moved on to treasurer and moved into sort of placekeeping presidents. Rod Merrick was another one who carried the torch, and he and Robert were basically the spark plugs behind all that happened. And there was the most unbelievable behavior. It just accelerated and devolved into terrible attacks on people who did not agree with the ENA, who were against the idea of a historic district, and became more entrenched the more that they were pushed at. The kind of things that went on was I remember there was one house on the corner of Reed College Place that one of the people objected strongly, and there was a campaign to throw bags of dog poop on the roof of the house, so that there was a real stream of dog poop all over the house. It became a thing. That same house, I was speaking to the young family that was there, and the wife said that she was in the front of the house when this large black SUV pulled up, and the person leaned over the hood of the car and made a cutting motion across his throat, like a Sicilian mafioso in front of her and her 5-year-old daughter. Well, the name of that person has never been revealed, but they knew someone in Salem who did a check on the license plate, and they knew who it was. They ended up leaving the neighborhood. It became too problematical, especially because the school had been weaponized as well. Certain pro-historic district moms had sort of taken control of the school and divided into a faction of for and against, and the children of parents who were against the idea of a historic district had a bad time, and families had to leave. Really an unfortunate time. This is a website, eastmorelandhistoricdistrict.com. You're welcome to take a look at. This is facts that have been assembled by our Eastmoreland Neighborhood LLC organization, and it remains sort of a time capsule of what was going on at the time, and it has a lot of good explanations. It was a really bad time. It was, let me tell you this other story. There was a really sleazy organization called HEART. I say sleazy. You let me know if this is sleazy or not. But they were all sort of an alternative allied organization that supported the ENA and their cause to bring a historic district to Eastmoreland. And they put out a call. They call it doxing. They listed the names of people that were for the historic district. They listed the names, and they listed their employers, and they listed the contact information for the employers, and they urged their members of HEART to contact the employers of people that were against the historic district and urged them to inform them about what their employees were doing or believed. Stuff I can't believe. Oh, here's another one too. There was one person who was not in favor of the historic district and had a particularly animated argument about the HD. And the next day he found a note on the porch of his home over sort of south of Crystal Springs, between like 35th and 39th. And the note said, "Back off or your house is going to get burned down with you in it." Well, we didn't hear much of him after that, so I guess that worked. Yeah, I can't believe it either. I can't believe it, and that's the kind of thing that went on, and they thought it was okay. That sort of stuff, I believe, was actively promoted and accepted, and I think the people should be ashamed of the way they acted. It's terrible. And I didn't see any of that, by the way, coming from people on the anti-historic district side. But there you go. Now let's go ahead and talk about another thing having to do with the Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association. There was a poll. That, and the poll said, are you for or against the historic district? I think that sounds great. Let's see, where is that? Okay, here it is. The vote. The ENA gambles and loses. The problem was the ENA actually said, oh, we'll put it to a vote. We'll win the vote, and then we can say the neighbors want it. Only problem, most people said no. No, they didn't want the historic district. Oops, big problem. Well, we can just, it turns out that you'll see how they deal with it, and how Robert McCullough was key to that whole effort of basically denying the results of the poll. So they did this poll, and basically the majority were opposed, 702 were opposed, 666 were in favor, 19 had no opinion, and it was mailed out to 2,000 eligible homeowners. Now some people said in favor of the historic district, well, wait a minute, only 702 were opposed. Then that means 666 were in favor. Then that means if you subtract this from the 2,000, all the remainders were not opposed to it because they didn't vote saying they were opposed, which is so convoluted and weird that I have trouble wrapping my head around it. And Robert McCullough took this one step further, where he declared, with his calling into evidence his scientific and statistical ability, and he declared that the poll was statistically irrelevant. It was too close to count, and it was not significant. Let me show you what is actually the truth about that. In fact, to do that, we're going to call up someone who lives in the neighborhood, someone named Paul Gronke. Paul, sorry to drag you into this again, but you spoke some real truth, and it was pretty good. He's actually a Carnegie Fellow and he is one of the world's leaders in voting, in government, and elections, what works and what doesn't, and what is a democracy. So, Paul got involved in writing a bit about it on the neighborhood next door, I believe it was, and Facebook, venturing his opinion, his very professional and precise opinion about the idea of statistical significance. Here is a comment, just sort of synthesized. He and Robert went back and forth. McCullough kept making public statements about talking about the error of a poll and not. It turns out that a poll, according to Dr. Gronke, is a simple mathematical sum of the people who have voted and the percentage of each. You simply see who has more votes, and whoever has more votes, they are the winner, if you will, or that's the result of the poll. McCullough kept insisting that the poll was statistically insignificant, they couldn't count on it, and they were going to ignore the results. And that is absolutely not the way polls work. Gronke said, yes, you are completely conflating the whole notion of what it is about. He said, I regret making this about one person, but Robert has been a prominent and at times very divisive voice in this debate who regularly cites his professional credentials as an economic forecaster. Unfortunately, he has now abandoned any pretense of scientific expertise. Yeah. So basically, McCullough was told by one of the world's leading experts that what he is saying is an error and misleading and deceptive, and told to knock it off, which he ignored. So now we know basically what McCullough will say or do simply to make a point. And by the way, I've never heard Robert McCullough apologize. There was a time when he mobilized a number of people on Reed College Place and stormed into the meeting where my wife, she was at the time the president of the ENA before McCullough, and he demanded action. And she said, look, this is not the way it works. We're working on it. Thanks for your attention. Goodbye. I was really unhappy and upset with McCullough. And it turns out I wanted an apology. And he did not. He refused to apologize. He doesn't apologize. By the way, Robert and I go back a long ways. I thought we were friends, and we were, and he was fun to be around, and he was a funny guy because he was simply so extreme in his weird behavior. And he ceased to be funny when he got involved with the ENA and was a toxic influence on the neighborhood. But anyway, we see here that he is confronted with the facts, with a professional opinion that is beyond reproach, and does not back off one bit from his misleading statements to the public and to the media, to the people, saying, I'm an expert, trust me, I'm a professional economic forecaster. And it's all garbage. Simply garbage. So what can you believe from him? I don't know. But it is useful to remember this going forward. This is what he's done in the past. And will he do it again in the future? I think so. As a poet once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So Robert has shown us who he is, and you've seen what experts have said about his misleading statements and how he's handled it. Very disappointing. Okay, this brings us to the email list. This is pretty weird behavior, even by McCullough's standards. But it's in the heat of the historic district. Apparently, people in the neighborhood have had enough of Robert McCullough. Perhaps they've determined that he's a toxic force, and he is voted off of the Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association. Now, this has never happened before. I was with the neighborhood association on the board from 2004 to 2014. And during a number of years, my wife Gretchen was the president and negotiated some very thorny issues between Reed College and Eastmoreland, and just did a wonderful job. McCullough was the president from 2013 to 2016 when he had to phase out, and then he became treasurer in 2016, and then people voted him off and they said, no thanks. I wish he went around knocking on doors to introduce himself in order to have people vote for him. But the funny thing is that the more he introduced himself, it seems the less people wanted to vote for him. Perhaps he might get the idea that he's only hurting himself by people getting to know him. Anyway, he was voted off the board. And I can imagine this stung. It did sting to the point that he had been trusted using his vast skills and computer ability to take care of the mailing list for the ENA. They gave him the mailing list, and they used a service called MailChimp to send out the different mailings and keep track of all the addresses. It's a valuable thing for an organization. Well, McCullough got voted off the board, and he said, it's mine. It's mine. We've maintained it. We've done work on it. And in fact, I got a lot of these names myself. I paid for them. I paid some real estate agent for this. And so it's really mine. And no, you can't have it back. Yeah. So I don't know what was going on with the board at the time, but they were probably pretty confused because I'm sure they like Robert and they put up with him, and he was their president and he was leading them through this whole historic district shakeup in the neighborhood. And then he says, I'm taking this. And yeah. Pretty weird. I was sent this by someone on the board. I think that maybe they wanted me to have it to know what was going on. But here we have some proof as to what was actually going on. This was sent to Robert McCullough from Rod Merrick, who had become the ENA president, and says, in March of 2018, in response to lingering concerns, they passed a resolution regarding the MailChimp email list and remaining in your ownership. I think that's such a nice way of saying it's remaining in your ownership. It means you took it and you didn't give it back. What an elegant way of saying that. And it's the resolution is going to confirm our earlier communications to not use it with a signature or subject that suggests that the communication is on behalf of the ENA, including any communications relating to the work of the Reed College Place Committee. Anyway, it says that they trust that you will not use it anymore, not misuse it, and they're going to keep a copy of the letter filed on record and sent a copy to the Southeast Uplift Communications Committee. So what this meant for the ENA was they had to rebuild their list because apparently they did not keep a copy of it. That they could trust Robert to keep copies of it, so why should they have to worry about it? What could go wrong? Well, yeah, he went ahead and took it, and then the ENA had to rebuild the list over a period of a couple of years, and losing people in the in those years that they lost contact with, and so on. But anyway, I can't understand why they would ever consider having him back on the board. You sort of once bitten, twice shy. You think that would sort of come into play, especially with all of his other behavior. And but I guess they're willing to give him another chance. This is a fun bit of McCullough trivia from way back in 2014 when he was first ENA president and feeling his oats. He decided to buy a drone and was going to spy on developers who were doing evil to the neighborhood. And he was going to spy on Union Pacific because they had rail cars that may be emitting pollutants. Let's see what he said here. He plans to use the drone to monitor the rail yard. He has photographs showing old locomotives, but he doesn't have proof that they're in use. So he's going to maintain a vigilant eye on the rail yard to make sure the offending trains are not doing what they shouldn't. And he was also going to fly around the neighborhood and look at development projects, such as a controversial home renovation. He plans to fly the drone only over public right-of-ways to legally protect himself in the neighborhood. Yeah, Robert, that's not the way it works, okay? You're going to be in big trouble. You're going to get a big fine. This is going to end badly. Read the regulations and play by the rules. He wishes he didn't have to feel so watchful, but he'll remain vigilant until the city returns to its role in environmental protection. Oh, okay. So what could go wrong? Oh, yes. Well, it says his drone spying plans violate FAA regulations, says one of the agencies involved. And here he is. Here's Robert with his flight gear and the drone. It turns out that you can't do that because you're using, in a commercial capacity, you would have to have a commercial drone pilot's license, and not a trivial matter. And it's subject to FAA regulation. And I don't know that our neighbors would really appreciate it, and certainly not the rail yard, which is subject to all sorts of protection, as a federal transportation hub. And you could really be in big trouble if you were caught even flying over it. This is a great place to wrap up and tell you a little background about how Robert came to be this neighborhood watchdog and activist, if you will. I was there when it happened, and this was back in the 2000s. And my wife was the neighborhood president, doing a great job, and he showed up at a board meeting saying that the Reed College place was full of mud. The grass was dying. Not understanding the way grass worked in the wintertime, and when people walk on it, it gets muddy, and then it comes back in the springtime. But something had killed the grass, and there was mud everywhere, and that's not the way he wanted it, and he needed it changed. Wanted it changed. And my wife, Gretchen, has a really great way of dealing with people that have a lot of passion and energy about a subject, and I'll come to that later, but she said, yes, that is a concern. I'm going to look at that, and I will get back to you, because I know a lot of other people probably feel that way too, and we'll get back to you. Well, she got back to Robert, and she said, well, the city is the one who takes care of it, and they aren't going to work on it right away because it's really wet out and there's not much they can do about it. But when it starts drying out in the spring, they're going to reseed and the grass will come back and it'll be really nice. Well, that wasn't good enough. He was pretty unhappy with that. He needed action. He needed things to be done. And he went, I don't know if he bought her coffee or something. Now, the thing to remember with Robert and sort of people like him, they realize that normal humans, when you buy them something or do something for them, they are grateful and they want to return the favor. And they can use that gratitude. They can use that gratitude to get what they want. So they will buy things like coffee, or they will invite you over for some dinner, some holiday dinner. And that will instill an outsized source of benefit for the small amount that they put out. So they will do that. Well, despite trying to appeal to my wife's sensibilities, how this needed to be done immediately and in a satisfactory manner, he then mobilized a bunch of people, I don't know, 20, 25 or so, on the Reed College, neighbors on the Reed College place, and they stormed in and filled up the schoolroom and demanded action. And McCullough had identified Gretchen as the source of the problem and refused to do anything about it and needed to be held accountable. And all these people were incensed at Robert's telling of the story about how she had neglected his sensible request to do something. And all of them were in danger of losing the trees, losing the grass. It was all going to hell, and nothing was being done. McCullough's wife, Karen Tosi, invited Gretchen to lunch. And Gretchen came into the restaurant and found Karen was already well started on her own lunch and had found just the perfect seat in the restaurant, one placed across a large mirror so she could see herself in preen throughout the meal. And later, during a contentious meeting when Gretchen was again confronted with her lack of meaningful activity to help the Tosis realize their dreams of prettier grass outside their door, Karen stood up and waved a bony finger and said, "I bought you lunch," which perfectly encapsulated the idea, if I buy you lunch, you owe me. But Gretchen didn't fall for that. Gretchen bought her own lunch. She was not going to get sucked into that. She was very clever and worldly in that way. So Gretchen has a way of dealing with people who are very motivated, shall we say, and insistent. She says, "You seem like this is really important to you, and I understand. You would be the perfect person to work on something like this, and I bet you could be really effective with the resources we have here at the ENA. I bet you could really solve the problem and help not just yourselves, but many other people." And that was the beginning of Robert McCullough's neighborhood activism on how he was called to a higher duty to help others and make his grass look better. And I think he rather enjoyed the attention, and I think we sort of unleashed a Trumpian, a Trump-like figure here in our our own neighborhood. One that is still with us today, and he's going around. Oh, and this is wonderful. When he goes out, he wants to beg people for their vote, and he goes from house to house. This is something no one has ever done. No one has ever done this in trying to seek a position on the E&A board. He will go from house to house. His dutiful wife grimly plodding along behind him with a stack of things. One year, I happened to see that he was going from house to house with boxes of, looked like shortbread cookies wrapped in a red bow, which he would give. There's another one. He would give these to people in hopes of engaging their favor and their very natural moral sense of reciprocation. Well, the problem is, I think that the more people that he met, the less people voted for him. The more he tries, the less people vote for him. I think there's something going on there. Either the word has gotten out about him, or there's something that people reject in some way. So this year, Robert has realized perhaps that maybe the best thing is not to have anything to do with people, and he has a better chance of being reelected to the board. He's tried mightily every year of being reelected to the board and not have really anything to do with them. Now he has spent hundreds of dollars, I don't know, maybe $1,000, $2,000, I don't know, and maybe using his mailing list finally to mail out a mass mailing across the neighborhood saying, please vote for me. I'm running again, and I would love to have your vote, and I do all these wonderful things. If you don't believe me, I'll tell you so, and maybe you don't know enough about me not to believe me. And that's really the point of this video, is to sort of lay bare some of the things I understand about Robert. Oh, by the way, Robert, the last time we went to lunch, I bought lunch, and you owe me, so that's on you, man. Oh, but, for the price of a lunch, I'm happy not to have another lunch with you. You got really tiresome, and I've enjoyed the vacation. So this is the end of the Robert McCullough Exposed, and now you know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey once said. This has been brought to you by Eastmoreland Neighborhood, LLC, and we're responsible for the content, and thanks for listening. And if you have any questions or anything, leave your comments here and share them with others, and I'll get back to you, and see you around the neighborhood.